Thank you so much. It's an excellent presentation, and really appreciate the practical perspectives from someone who's got boots on the ground and dealing with this each and every day. Again, for everyone, we are going to be taking questions in the Q&A box, and we will circle back at the end of the presentation to answer questions. And also, we may answer some in real time, but we will probably circle back to those. Dr. Quancom, do you want to introduce our next speakers?
Thank you, Elliot. Okay, and I'm not in an LMIC, so as we talk about cybersecurity issues in LMICs, just think about the limitations, the context within which we're working. But it's now a pleasure to go to the next phase, which deals with global digital apps and what happens with security in that domain. So please, I'll let the speakers introduce themselves and present their work. Thank you very much for being with us.
Carla, I think you're next.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Hello, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure. Yep. Can everyone hear me, by the way? All good? Perfect, thank you. Well, yes, everyone, thanks so much. Super excited to have today's conversation. I'm looking forward to the Q&A as well. My name is Damle. I'm the CEO and founder over here at Helium. Really, the goal is how do we provide instant access to specialists 24/7 the world around. I'm here wonderfully joined by Jason Lee over at Zoom, who's the CISO over there, Chief Information Security Officer. Little quick background on myself, serial entrepreneur in the space, usually somewhere at the intersection between healthcare and AI. I founded a company called Lumiata, which is really about modern AI in healthcare. I've also been an operator at a health plan, started companies to replace pharmacy benefit management companies here with perhaps a differentiated model, as well as invested and advised in the space, and sort of took all those learnings across the spectrum to launch here what we're going to talk about in terms of Helium. Jason, do you want to give a quick intro to yourself?
Sure, thanks, Ash. So like I said, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer here at Zoom. Previously, I was at Salesforce, and before that, I spent a lot of time at Microsoft. And similar to Christian, I started as doing attack and penetration, actually, and so I was on the hacking side of things. Is how I started my career in security, and so I've progressed. Kind of I ran a lot of critical infrastructure for Microsoft for several years. Had all the crypto for the whole company, all the products, and then also secured Windows Update to make sure that that was safe and secure for just a couple of Windows machines out there across the world. So. Happy to be here. It's a pleasure to be here and talk a little bit about Zoom and our partnership with Ash here.
Thank you so much, Jason. So I'll just jump on in, and obviously excited by the conversation in a little bit. Perfect. So really what we're trying to do is how do we deliver care that's faster, that's lighter, that's safer than you ever imagined, right? And really, as we all have sort of seen, there's been an extraordinary evolution over the last 2 years. If the silver lining of our recent pandemic is the fact that we've all had to learn how to leverage technology to its maximum. And I think there's obviously more to go, right? So, and part of what we were asked to talk about is how is it you architect a digital health app today in the land of the ever-evolving modern security landscape, right? So obviously we take the previous conversation, which provided us an extraordinary context as to what's going on. How is it that you can evaluate and think about digital health apps so that they are addressing the needs that happen to be there? So in short, today does not equal yesterday. There's extraordinary number of advancements, right? When we talk about AI, we talk about communications, we talk about Zoom. You know, in some senses, I think of there as an evolution, right? We think about like in the internet, we kind of got Amazon, right? If you think about the mobile side of the world, we had Uber and Lyft and DoorDash, right, that are obviously there around the world. And then obviously when we think about the Zoom era, a whole new set of potential starts happening, right? And so really we've become very highly connected and very data rich. But the truth of the matter is that we're still very care poor, right? The wait times to see a specialist here are in the order in the US of 24 days, and it's even longer around the world, right? And the question we have to ask ourselves is, we can have a Zoom like we're doing right now in 2 seconds flat to almost anyone around the world. Why can't we get to talk to the people that we need to in the most important times, right? And so that's really the question that we're trying to solve is, how do we deliver that instant unified care, that instant specialist care 24/7? And how do we do that in a way that's secure, that's sustainable, and really drives a modern logistics platform? Because it's not just about the encounter, it's the before, it's the during and after, so that as an individual, wherever you may be in the world, right in the middle of Kenya, you may be in Peru or Argentina, you may be in India, you may be here. How do you enable someone to access a specialist within 10 minutes or less, 24/7? How do you support, insurance companies, states, nations to make sure that their people have fast access to the right care in a very cost-effective way? How do you unlock the capacity of the extraordinary physicians around the world in a way that, they can easily get reimbursed, but also provide care to people wherever they may be? And how do you support health systems, right, both national as well as private, in ways that they can get the augmentation from the types of providers that they need so that they can help support the patients that happen to be there, right? So that's really our question of, how do we deal with local demand, leveraging global supply, being able to take this concept of Uberized provider networks and technology and mobile, so that we can actually move to a situation where there is no scheduling required, right? And so really, to give you just an understanding of what we're trying to do here at Helium, is it's a care logistics platform with 3 modules, right? It's about how do we deliver faster. That's really the idea of Uberized provider network. So think about all your specialists and all your providers, kind of like almost Uber drivers, right? Just you click, we ping a bunch of folks, see who's available and connect, right? And that's made possible by 2 days, internet and mobile internet, right? Lighter, the fact that, this extraordinary device called our smartphones allows us to have a conversation, a video conversation, very high density conversation with people immediately, right? And that's really an extraordinary power of Zoom. And then you combine that with AI, you can do amazing things. And then how is it that we can leverage the fintech that happens to be there so that we can provide ways that are make that sustainable, right? And even beyond that, it's, as per today's conversation, how do we make that safe and secure, right? And this is sort of a notion where for those from a clinical engineering perspective, from those from a computer science perspective, as we think about, GitHub, and we think about how we have basically code infrastructure as we have data infrastructure, right? There's also programmable security infrastructure that's come about, right? And how do you have that support both the data, the people, and the communications, right? And so really what we're doing is we're sort of putting all that together by combining sort of AI with an operational model and, that payment model as well with data. And so collectively, what we're trying to do at Helium with an app, right, is, we're simply trying to enable you to access an individual within 10 minutes, 24/7, right? So the idea is, how can we match you? How do we help deliver that care? And how do we ensure that quality, right? And so one of those crazy notions that we've sort of taken about, if I'm sure many of you are familiar with teleradiology, we've sort of said, how is it that we can get a second physician to review that situation that's local, that's in that environment, in that state, in that insurance network, depending upon where you are, to make sure that all the right things are being done, but therefore really unlock that capacity, right? So that's really what we're trying to do with that care logistics platform, right, and being in health app. But the truth is, with all this extraordinary benefits of being able to talk and connect and everything, there's the risk, right? All things have sort of 2 sides to them. And obviously today we've talked about some of them and how to think about them earlier. But the question is, how is it that we can architect our application to address some of these issues that were mentioned, right? And so one of the things as we think about health, obviously privacy is really important. So is there a way in which you can ensure the fact that anybody's access to someone's data is only temporary? The answer is yes, right? When we think about sort of data breaches, as we sort of just articulated a while earlier, how can we minimize the likelihood for that to happen by rotating encryption keys, right? So it's not like I have the same encryption key and for the next 5 years, I'm just going to use that, right? That's obviously not a very exciting way to solve the problem. And I'm sure Jason can clearly talk about that, much more so than me, right? But that's another thing, right? How do we enable or maximize resilience? So the point is, you don't want a single point of failure. If one particular place is breached, you don't want the entire thing to fall apart. How do you have multiple layers so that you have that resiliency, right? How do you ensure compliance? Basically, how do you distribute your data to all the different geolocations, right? So as you're adhering to things like GDPR and otherwise, so how do you have that regulatory compliance, right? You're basically driving robustness is, one of the most amazing things I think perhaps was truly proven over the last 1.5 years is the internet works. It's really awesome. But as an engineer, it was entirely developed to deal with the fact that any one thing can be removed and the communication just flow around, right? And so that's an extraordinary aspect that happens to be there. And then we've had a lot of things. We talk about FaceTime, Touch ID. How can we leverage these things? And everything from Google Firebase to Okta to extraordinary solutions that people have to enable basically ensuring someone's identity, right? Because it's not just about the data, but who and what and when, right? So that's really sort of these concepts and ways to sort of address that. And you got to sort of take those into account, right? And so when you want to log everything, you want to monitor everything, you want to analyze everything, so that whenever you're storing something, you're transferring something or interacting, everything from a tech perspective to people to process, you really sort of take those sort of considerations into account when designing the way in which you're architecting your solution. Right. And my hope here is this is just the start of the conversation. So please, jump on in. And what we really found was the way, like, you can never expect that today will be the same as it is every day, right? Things will evolve. So you got to think about your solution as a programmable security infrastructure so that you can easily deploy, right? Code can be deployed, data can be deployed, security can be deployed, right? And really that allows you so that data can be decentralized, decoupled, right? Which is a fact that's there. We talked about that rotating encryption, right? But for people, how do I make sure we identify them? How do I have the proper audit logs? How do we look at things like trust graphs? And then communication, right? How do we enable, secure and efficient communications, right? So really these are sort of these different components. And my hope here today was to sort of talk about using us as just an example, right, of how we think about building a secure global health app, right? And so there are a variety of components that happen to be there that you just some recognize as pieces that people use. So one of them happens to be key management services. So Amazon has a nice one. So that really simplifies your ability to rotate and manage your encryption keys, right? This idea of being able to hot deploy. So we talked about ransomware earlier, right? Part of that point is someone's holding a particular something hostage. But if you can leverage things like Kubernetes, where you can hot deploy your entire solution within literally minutes, you can tear down the other one and bring up a new one, right? So the whole point is it's much more resilient towards those types of things because your ability to have your data, have it in multiple different places, sharded, et cetera, but then being able to stand up in your entire sort of platform so that therefore you have that security towards those types of things, right? And then, this is where if you can store your data and sync it and have the robustness. So these collective types of things really start providing you that programmable security infrastructure from the data perspective. And these are some example components that we are using to sort of solve that. When we go to people, it's not just the machines that we have to secure. We have to make sure that the people are the people, right? We don't want a physician or a person claiming to be a physician to be on the network. We want to identify who they are. And this is where the evolution of things like FaceTime, Face ID and Touch ID and things like that start allowing us a vehicle, especially when we can start doing things like looking at certifications and looking at them from a sort of a distributed ledger perspective, and providing those ideas into play, where we can say this person is indeed this person, and they do indeed have these credentials, so that they can indeed do these types of activities. And that's another part of the security of providing sort of a digital health app, right? Who are the people that they're supposed to be, and they're enabling them to be able to do the right things, right? And obviously, communication, like what we're doing now, is super important. And being able to do that right is, I think, critical, especially in what we're doing. And so